Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive into one of history's biggest puzzles.
Sounds intriguing. Let's hear it.
All right, we're looking at the Petrozavodsk Phenomenon.
Ah, classics.
Right. We're talking September 20th, 1977, in Petrozavodsk, Russia. Starts like any normal night, but then things get really weird.
I can imagine what happened.
Imagine you're there looking up at the stars, and suddenly this thing appears.
Oh, this is where the UFO comes in.
Exactly, something totally strange and bright, nothing you've ever seen before.
Now, that's a story I'd love to hear more about. It's not just one person seeing this, right?
Not at all. That's what makes this so interesting.
Yeah.
We have tons of eyewitness accounts, people all saying the same thing.
So it's not just some blurry photo or a single person's word.
Nope, we're talking multiple people, even military guys and scientists were there.
Wow, so even the experts were baffled.
Totally.
Yeah.
And they all describe these crazy details, stuff that just doesn't add up.
All right, lay it on me. What exactly are we talking about here? What did they actually see?
So they're describing this huge oval-shaped craft. It wasn't just a light zipping by.
Okay, so a proper object.
Yeah, and it had this pulsing light, almost like a heartbeat. And the way it moved,
It wasn't like any plane they'd seen.
nothing like it. Totally defied how normal aircraft move.
Sounds like we're heading into X-Files territory.
You could say that. And get this, some people said they felt super uneasy while it was happening.
Uneasy how?
Like disoriented or even like they'd lost track of time.
Whoa, hold on. Are we talking missing time like those alien abduction stories?
Some people even described it that way, yeah.
So it wasn't just visually strange, they felt it too. That's wild.
It really is. This wasn't some faraway light show. This thing messed with people, left them shaken.
And you said even trained observers, people used to weird stuff, were stumped.
Completely. That's what makes this a true puzzle. They couldn't explain it away with their usual knowledge.
That definitely adds another layer to the mystery. So we have this object acting bizarrely, defying physics as we know it.
Right, and we're left wondering what could possibly explain it.
Naturally, where do we even begin to unpack this?
Well, the most basic explanation could be a natural phenomenon. Like maybe it was ball lightning. Ever heard of that?
Oh yeah, ball lightning, isn't that still pretty mysterious itself?
Exactly. We don't fully understand it, but could that be the answer here?
Maybe. But wouldn't ball lightning be more random? This thing seemed pretty deliberate in its movements.
You're right, and that's where the ball lightning explanation gets tricky. Especially when people describe this thing accelerating like crazy.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like any natural event I've heard of.
Right. It's
Right.
hard to make that fit. So then we think, okay, if it wasn't nature, could it be man-made?
Now we're talking secret projects, right? This was the Cold War after all. Could it be something the Soviets were cooking up?
Exactly. Some top-secret aircraft or tech we didn't know about.
It's possible, I guess. But even with all the Cold War secrecy, you'd think something that advanced would have leaked out somehow.
That's a good point. Plus, think about what people described. Maneuvering like we can't even do today, even messing with time, maybe?
True, even today that seems pretty far-fetched. So if it's not natural, and probably not some super secret human tech,
What are we left with?
well, that leaves us with the big one, doesn't it? Aliens.
That's right, the extraterrestrial hypothesis. Is that what we're dealing with here? Could this be a sign of alien visitors?
Now, that's a question for the ages. And to be honest, it's not impossible. I mean, look at how this thing acted and the effects it had on people.
Right, it's not just a light in the sky, it's like it interacted with reality itself.
Exactly. And the whole missing time thing, the disorientation, that's classic UFO lore right there.
It really is. But before we jump to conclusions, we need to look at all the options carefully.
Absolutely, we need to be thorough. Could ball lightning really do something like this? Were the Soviets that far ahead of everyone else? And if it was aliens, what were they doing here?
Big questions, and maybe some answers are waiting for us as we dig deeper.
So, where were we? Ah, yes, ball lightning. Let's dig into that a bit.
All right, you mentioned it's still a bit of a mystery itself.
It really is. Rare, not well understood,
Yeah.
but we know it exists. There have been documented cases.
So some folks think maybe that's what people saw in Petrozavodsk, just a super intense version of it.
That's the idea. Maybe it was ball lightning, but behaving in ways we haven't seen before.
Behaving how? What makes it a possible fit for this case?
Well, think about some of the things people describe about ball lightning. Moving erratically, hovering, even passing through solid objects.
Wait, passing through things, that's getting a bit spooky.
Right. It tells us there's a lot we don't get about how it works, how it interacts with normal physics.
Okay, so maybe it could explain some of the strange movements of the object, but what about that crazy acceleration people describe?
That's where it gets tricky, no doubt about it. We've never seen ball lightning move like that.
So it's a possibility, but a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I'd say so. We'd need to see ball lightning do some pretty extraordinary things to make it fit with Petrozavodsk.
Fair enough. So let's move on to option 2. The secret Soviet tech idea. Is there anything concrete to back that up? Any whispers or hints from back then?
Not a lot of hard evidence, to be honest, but there have always been rumors about those Cold War projects.
Like what kind of things were they supposedly working on?
Well, some researchers point to this idea of psychotronic weapons.
Psychotronic. That sounds intense.
It is. Basically, the idea is that these weapons use some kind of electromagnetic energy to mess with people's minds.
Whoa, like mind control stuff. That sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie.
It does, doesn't it? But some people believe the Soviets were really looking into this kind of thing.
So could that explain how people felt in Petrozavodsk? That uneasiness, the disorientation?
It's possible. Maybe this object was emitting some kind of energy that messed with people's perceptions.
Interesting. But could it create that whole visual spectacle too? The object, the lights, the movement?
That's where the psychotronic theory gets weak. It might explain some of the feelings people had, but the object itself, its movements, the missing time reports, that's harder to explain with just mind-altering tech.
Right. It's like we need 2 explanations, one for how people felt and another for what they actually saw.
Exactly. And while we can't rule anything out completely, we got to be cautious about jumping to conclusions. Just because something's unexplained doesn't automatically mean it's a secret government project.
True. We have to be careful with that line of thinking. Okay, so that brings us to the biggest idea of all, aliens. What makes people think this could be an extraterrestrial event?
Well, honestly, it's the way the object behaved. Those rapid accelerations, the instant changes in direction, the silent hovering. That's textbook UFO stuff right there.
And you mentioned that pulsing light before.
Right. Like a breathing, a heartbeat. It almost makes you think of something organic, not just a machine.
It's almost like it was alive.
That's the question, isn't it? And then you have those reports of missing time, the disorientation. That adds another layer of strangeness.
Alien abductions, that kind of thing.
Some people go there, yeah. It's definitely the most controversial part of the Petrozavodsk case.
I can see why. It's one thing to see a strange light in the sky. It's another to think maybe your memories are being messed with.
Exactly. It raises some big questions about what's real, what we can trust about our own experiences.
It's kind of unsettling, isn't it? Like reality itself is a bit more fragile than we think.
A bit unsettling, but also fascinating. Makes you think about the limits of human perception, what we might be missing about the universe.
Like we're just seeing a tiny sliver of what's really out there.
Exactly. And maybe events like Petrozavodsk.
Yeah.
They're little glimpses beyond that sliver.
Okay, so we have our 3 contenders. Ball lightning, secret Soviet tech, and aliens. Each with their own strengths and weaknesses.
None of them a perfect fit, but each offering a different way to look at the puzzle.
So what's the verdict? Which one is the most likely explanation?
Well, that's the thing about a good mystery. We may never know for sure.
So even after all this, Petrozavodsk remains an enigma.
It does. But that doesn't mean it's meaningless. Even without a clear answer, it forces us to stretch our thinking, to imagine possibilities we might not have considered before.
It's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know.
Absolutely. And that's a good thing. It keeps us curious, keeps us exploring, keeps us open to the idea that the universe is full of surprises. You know, even without a definitive answer, Petrozavodsk has left its mark. It's a story that's still unfolding, really.
How so? What's the lasting impact of something like this?
Well, on one hand, it's a big reality check. Like, we think we've got the universe figured out, that we know how things work.
And then, bam, something like this happens.
Yeah, exactly. It throws a wrench in our neat little understanding of things. Reminds us that we're not quite as in control as we like to think.
Still a lot of mystery out there.
Oh, tons. And that's a good thing. It should make us a bit more humble, you know, open to the idea that there's stuff we don't know and maybe can't know.
So it's not just about figuring out if it was ball lightning or aliens or whatever.
Right. It's bigger than that. It's about questioning what we think is real, what we think is possible.
Makes you reevaluate things.
Totally. And that's healthy, right? To keep asking questions, to not get too stuck in our ways.
You mentioned that Petrozavodsk had a big impact on UFO research, too. How so?
Well, Before this, a lot of people dismissed UFO sightings as hoaxes or just people seeing things.
Easy to explain away.
Right. But when you have trained observers, military guys, scientists, all saying they saw something truly weird,
It's harder to ignore.
much harder. Petrozavodsk gave legitimacy to the whole field of UFO research, pushed it more towards actual science.
Made people take it seriously.
Exactly. And it forced researchers to step up their game, come up with better ways to investigate these things, to be more open-minded about the possibilities.
So even if we never figure out what that object was,
The search itself has been valuable. It's pushed us to learn more, to expand our thinking.
like those investigations into ball lightning you mentioned.
Exactly. Trying to explain Petrozavodsk has actually taught us more about how our atmosphere works, about weird electromagnetic stuff. Who knows what else we'll find as we keep digging?
So maybe that's the real legacy of this whole thing, not just the mystery itself.
But what has inspired us to do? The research, the questions, the new ways of thinking about the universe.
It's kept that sense of wonder alive.
Absolutely. And that's something we need, right? That curiosity, that drive to explore, to not be afraid of the unknown.
To look up at the sky and think, what else is out there?
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, events like Petrozavodsk are little hints of something bigger, something beyond our current understanding.
So if people are feeling a little too sure of themselves, too stuck in their routines,
Tell them to remember Petrozavodsk.
let it shake things up a bit.
Yeah. Remind them that there are still mysteries to uncover, things that challenge our assumptions about reality itself.
That there's still magic in the world.
Definitely. And who knows, maybe someday we'll find those answers we're looking for.
Or maybe the journey itself is the real reward.
Well said. The search for knowledge, for understanding, that's what makes us human.
And on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Petrozavodsk phenomenon.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you enjoyed exploring this strange and wonderful event with us.
And remember, keep questioning, keep wondering, keep looking up at the sky. You never know what you might find.